back in the friendly confines of West High School today and in the classroom to do some video production. We're going to look at the double FRQ, and we're going to probably do these in two separate segments so you can watch them as you need them. We still have a lot of people who need to get some stuff done, so that's why, again, we're holding off new FRQs until Thursday. And I know there's some technology glitches as well, but I'm going to be trying to make a lot of contacts today and trying to help some people out. But let's take a look at this first FRQ, the double FRQ. Remember, on exam day, you're going to have a 15-minute FRQ, then you're going to have 5 minutes to upload and submit that FRQ, and then you will have 25 more minutes. So it's sort of going to be like what you practiced here. The only difference is you're going to totally complete the shorter one, turn it in, and then do the other one. You don't get to pick and choose which one you do first, which is normally how this works, okay? So we're going to review this one that a lot of you really, really struggled with. This is an older FRQ from several years ago, and this is one the introduction is short but very informative. It says, over the last 150 years, so we're tracing this back now to 1860s, 70s, Europe has changed from a source to a destination region for international migration. So we're talking about immigration, international migration, country to country, state to state. And it says it has changed from a source. We must clear this up. A source means Europe was a place people were leaving from, to a destination region, which means now they're a place people are going to. It is important to get the gist of that from the beginning. It helps us explain then the answer, or to answer the other parts. A says use the demographic transition model to explain briefly Europe's development as a source of international migrants between 1800 and 1920. Using the model, anytime it says use the model, you must talk about stages. Must. So we got to identify stages. To briefly explain Europe's development as a source, meaning a place people were leaving from between 1800 and 1920. So again, since I know I've got to use stages and I'm supposed to know the transition model well, I'm asking myself, what stage would Europe have been in 1800? That's Industrial Revolution. That's an automatic. You know they triggered into stage 2. By 1920, where would Europe have been? Well, definitely probably out of stage 2. And so next, of course, is stage 3. You might ask yourself, would they have been in 4 yet? I hope you realize that by 1920, they would not have been in 4. That would come 30, 40, 50, even maybe years later. So I would identify an A, and I've got to explain that Europe would have been in stage 2 and 3. Now, what does that have to do with people leaving countries? Well, the things you should have talked about that are very simple are in stage 2 countries and early 3s, you have huge population growth. And with huge population growth, there's population pressure. People need jobs. People look for places to live. People are looking for farmland. And Europe was getting crowded. So being stage 2 and 3, as even Zelensky would talk about, leads to an outmigration. A was only worth 1 point. You had to mention growing population and also should have mentioned the stages 2 and 3. Some of you misread that question and you talked about why people were coming to Europe. Please read that again and please convince yourself and understand that's not what the question is asking. B part, identify and briefly explain one factor other than demographic transition. So now we can't talk about population on B, because it says other than demographic transition that's responsible for Europe's development as a source of migrants to the United States. So why were people leaving Europe and going to the U.S. between 1800 and 1920? Well, obviously it was a little different around 1920 than it was 1840. In 1840, it could be economic opportunities to farm land and have a life of their own and freedoms and to get away from religious persecution and stuff like that. But around 1920, it actually could be jobs that had developed in the United States with the Industrial Revolution and the opportunities that came with that. But the go-to answer, in my opinion, around 1840 was the Irish potato famine. You need to explain just a little bit about how that affected the Irish people who were mostly poor. Their families could starve, and so they picked up everything they owned, and they came to America where there was an abundance of free farmland and lots of job opportunities. That would be the one I would turn to. You can talk about persecutions, but if you talk about persecutions, they usually require, B's a 2-point question, to get both points, you got to be a little more descriptive than just saying political persecution. You got to talk a little bit about the Catholic Protestant feuds that were occurring in Europe and certain countries, and how America had more freedoms for those categories than those places. So this is an FRQ a lot of you guys can learn a lot from. Again, this one never bothers me that people mess up the first time. It only bothers me if you don't learn from this one, because this one is a good teaching tool. C is a great one. Briefly explain how three aspects, this is worth 3 points, the whole thing's worth 6. 3 aspects of the demographic transition model account for Europe's transformation into a destination region for migrants from North Africa. So we're changing what we're talking about. Why are North Africans between 1960 and 2000 coming to Europe? And what's it got to do with demographic transition? 3 aspects. Anytime a question asks me about demographic transition, I'm going to talk stages. Always. I'm going to identify Europe stages at this point, or stage. I'm going to identify North Africa's stage at this point. And then I'm going to say, what does that have to do with North Africans moving to Europe? Europe undoubtedly should be a stage 4, and you shouldn't consider anything else between 1960 and 2000. North Africa, likely stage 2, maybe showing some signs of early 3, but more so 2. Maybe more early 3 now, but then 2. So, with that being the case, what are 3 aspects of that? You can't just say the names of the stages. You got to know the stages. You know that in stage 4, people don't have a lot of kids, which means a lack of young workers, which means Europe needs workers because it's in stage 4. That's one aspect. Second aspect, you know that in stage 4, even headed toward 5, that there's an older population, an elderly dependency ratio. It'd be great to talk about elderly and youth dependency there. And a lot of those people make up the population of Europe, but are not able to work anymore, meaning even more of a need for more workers in Europe. Therefore, immigration. North Africa, being stage 2, has a growing population, a high youth dependency, lots of young people, and probably not enough jobs in most circumstances. Definitely not jobs that pay better. Europe has jobs, need workers. Africa has workers, needs jobs. Complementary relationship, 3 aspects of demographic transition. Guys, that's what we're talking about. C is a great practice kind of example. Matter of fact, you want to know what you're probably going to see on the test? In my opinion, okay? In my opinion, you're going to see questions like A and C on the test, things you cannot look up. And so I know you can go back and find answer keys for these questions from the past. Don't do it as you're practicing. You need to practice your brain thinking and critically analyzing. All right, that's the first one. I'm going to do a separate video for the other FRQ. Just works better that way, and that way you can divide it up.